All right, nested queries. So this is a very interesting topic. There are ways to do queries or add multiple queries into a single query. And that's called a nested query. So for example, instead of doing select star from table name, instead of the table name, you can put in parentheses and say select blah, blah, blah. And use that result instead of the table name. That's just one example. There are many, many other examples. So what I want to do is to introduce you to the concept of nested queries and basically tell you never use it. Well, and always, never is a very strong word. Sometimes you have to use it. Sometimes you want to use it. But at least begin with the mindset that you will just avoid nested queries unless your team specifically has another rules or process on using nested query. And the reason is nested queries are often, it makes query hard to read. Sometimes it's better to actually do things in 2, 3 queries instead of trying to do all of that into a single query, right? So for readability of the SQL query, sometimes it's okay. Do it in 3 queries instead of 1. But sometimes when you have this nested queries, you're doing things very, very inefficiently. And again, I'm not saying all nested queries are inefficient. Some nested queries are fine. They're efficient. But some nested queries is as if you put a for loop inside another for loop, which means it's a big old notation of n to the square. It's very, very slow. An example of that, for example, is let's say you have a students table and you have n number of students. And for each, whenever you look up one record, you also do another n searches, right? That's a big O notation of n to the square because you're doing n to the square number of lookups. Okay, very, very inefficient. Now, when the database is very small, you may feel like, oh, it was quick. I don't have any issues. But if the database gets bigger and bigger and bigger, a single query like that can drain the whole server resources and create a huge bottleneck. A lot of times it's because of nested queries. There are other reasons. And again, as you level up, as you get more familiar with SQL queries, database design, as you learn how to level up as a developer, you will learn some of these additional tools that you can use to speed things up. But again, as a word of caution, I would say never start with the mindset that you're going to create a nested query. Okay, sometimes again, it may be perfectly okay, but for my companies, I basically tell developers, never use it because it's inefficient. If you can do it in 3 queries, do it in 3 queries. Okay, so, but still important for you to understand and be able to tell by looking at a query whether it's a nested query or not. So go in and read a little bit. We're not going to go too deep into doing nested queries. You can do some very, very interesting, cool things with nested queries, but most web developers don't really use it. And I don't think you should use it that much because it could, again, cause some performance issues. Okay? All right.